Parents. When I think of my mother, I cannot separate her image from my idea of love, for love was the natural ingredient in the sweet, soft tones of her voice. On the day I lost my mother, I wrote in my diary, "The greatest tragedy in my life has just happened." Even as an adult living away from my mother, her loss left me feeling as abandoned as a small orphan. I know that many friends in the West do not feel the same way about their parents. I've heard many stories about parents who have hurt their children so much, planting many seeds of suffering in them. But I believe the parents did not mean to plant those seeds. They did not intend to make their children suffer. Maybe they received the same kind of seeds from their parents. This is a continuation in the transformation of seeds, and their father and mother might have gotten those seeds from their grandfather and grandmother. Most of us are victims of a kind of living that is not mindful, and the practice of mindful living, of meditation, can stop these kinds of suffering and end the transmission of such sorrow to our children and grandchildren. We can break the cycle by not allowing these kinds of seeds of suffering to be transmitted to our children, our friends, or anyone else. A 14-year-old boy who practices at Plum Village told me this story. When he was 11, he was very angry at his father. Every time he fell down and hurt himself, his father would shout at him. The boy vowed to himself that when he grew up, he would be different. But last year, his little sister was playing with other children and she fell off a swing and scraped her knee. It was bleeding and the boy became very angry. He wanted to shout at her, "How stupid, why did you do that?" But he caught himself because he had practiced breathing and mindfulness. He could recognize his anger and he did not act on it. The adults were taking good care of his sister, washing her wound and putting a band-aid on it. So he walked away slowly and practiced breathing on his anger. Suddenly, he saw that he was exactly like his father. He told me, "I realized that if I didn't do something about my anger in me, I would transmit it to my children." At the same time, he saw something else. He saw that his father may have been a victim just like him. The seeds of his father's anger might have been transmitted by his grandparents. It was a remarkable insight for a 14-year-old boy, but because he had been practicing mindfulness, he could see like that. I told myself to continue practicing in order to transform my anger into something else. And after a few months, his anger disappeared. Then he was able to bring the fruits of his practice back to his father. And he told him that he used to be angry at him, but now he understood. He said he wished that his father would practice also, in order to transform his own seeds of anger. We usually think that parents have to nourish their children, but sometimes the children can bring enlightenment to the parents and help transform them. When we look at our parents with compassion, often we see that our parents are only victims who never had the chance to practice mindfulness. They could not transform the suffering in themselves. But if we see them with compassionate eyes, we can offer them joy, peace, and forgiveness. In fact, when we look deeply, we discover that it is impossible to drop all identity with our parents. Whenever we take a bath or a shower, if we look closely at our body, we will see that it is a gift from our parents and their parents. And as we wash each body part, we can meditate on the nature of the body, and the nature of life, asking ourselves, to whom does this body belong? Who has given this body to me? What has been given? If we meditate in this way, we will discover that there are three components: the giver, the gift, and the one who receives the gift. The giver is our parents. We are the continuation of our parents and our ancestors. The gift is our body itself. The one who receives the gift is us. As we continue to meditate on this, we see clearly that the giver, the gift, and the receiver are one. All three are present in our body. When we are deeply in touch with the present moment, we can see that all our ancestors and all our future generations are present in us. Seeing this, we will know what to do and not what to do. For ourselves, our ancestors, our children, and their children. It's really nice, eh?
Yeah, man.
I thought it was so beautiful.
It's really well written.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I love that, if you look at your body,
Yeah.
it's you can see your parents, yourself,
Yeah.
and then your future generations.
Yeah.
I thought that was really nice.
And it's what they call ancestral curses as well, passed on from generation to generation. And then it's we were talking about this the other day as well. And your parents kind of just pass on, not just physical, but also that emotional, mental, everything. And then it sometimes just takes, and I've seen a lot of people in our generation are breaking that.
Yeah.
A lot of that. When you see the dads around us and how they parent their kids and stuff. Whereas my dad was probably parenting us the way his dad parented him and whatnot. Yeah.
I feel like that's why if we can sometimes step back, and I think that's the beautiful thing about meditation, right?
Yeah.
Is that meditation is is the exercise to help you develop the skill and tool of mindfulness. And so then if you can be mindful and just like be compassionate in your like curiosity and be like, why does my dad scream at me? Or why did my dad talk to me like that? Or why did my dad treat my mother like that? But from a compassionate perspective, and really try to understand their upbringings, then you can see the seeds that were nourished in them. Those seeds of like anger, those seeds of jealousy, those seeds of self-criticism. And so, you can approach it from a different angle.
Totally, man.
Here we are, man.
Yeah.
Next episode, right?
That's it, man.
So what we decided to do, we were talking after the last episode of relationships, how we're really happy and proud of that episode. But there was just like so much content that we still wanted to continually cover.
Dude, we said at the start, it's such a broad topic, and it's, even a second episode still won't cover everything, but there was so many things that I think you and I were talking about it, that after we played it back, we will realize, wow, there was just so much more stuff that we wanted to talk about. And you can go on. I think you had some really good notes that you were talking about with that relationship itself.
Yeah, so I wrote, like, after listening to our last episode with myself and you and Ads, I noticed that we didn't go into too much detail with one of like the most important relationships. So it was on so this episode is going to be on relationships, like continued. But how we didn't cover one of the most important topics, which was the relationship with ourselves, like with the self.
It all starts from within. That's the thing. It all starts from within. And it's if you don't have that relationship with yourself, it's so hard to have the capacity to have relationships with everything outside of you. And something that we probably won't talk about, but even just like relationships with, like, say, non-living things, right? I was thinking about this today, like your relationship with money, your relationship with work. It's just so broad. And I was talking to Jonas today on the phone, and I was talking about back when I was living in Marrickville, and I was saying how, like, I used to always complain about being broke. I was like, I don't have any money. And then I realized how stupid I sounded. I'm like, man, I'm going out drinking every weekend, spending hundreds of dollars, and then I'm complaining about being broke. And it's just that mindset and that relationship that you have, right? But then at that time, I had really poor self-awareness and stuff as well, right? It wasn't until I had to actually dig down, I realized how stupid I sounded. And then understanding myself and building that relationship with myself. And then that just improved my relationship with money, my relationship with the type of work I do, even the way I see my friends and stuff. But it all stems from within. That's why, like you said, it's literally the most important relationship you can have.
So I was just like thinking about it so much. And I wrote just here, like, the self. It was like that reflection was that in order to have healthy relationships, in order to have a healthy relationship with our partners, a healthy relationship with our children, healthy relationships with our friends, with our workplace, whatever it may be, you got to be like in tune with yourself. And I was like really thinking about it, and I noticed that how like all my actions and behaviors, essentially how I interact with everyone, with the people that I love, is going to be heavily warped by how I treat myself, So if I'm incredibly judgmental towards myself, I'm my own worst critic, I don't speak to myself very positively, well, that's gonna, seep out in other relationships. And so that's why I thought like it'd be good like to talk about the relationship with oneself and like how do we build a healthy relationship with ourselves and what that looks like. And so
did you find that once you started prioritizing that relationship with yourself, all those other relationships just amplified and blossomed?
I was mentioning to you and Adam the other day, and I was having a good chat about it with Rose. I was getting like really emotional talking to Rose about it. Was that like the last couple of weeks I've been so proud of the way that like I've been parenting. I've been so proud of the way that I've been like a partner, with my wife. And it's not to say that I've never been a good partner, a good husband or a good father, but more that just the amount of like, say, love and compassion and understanding and empathy that I bring now to my household, to my family, to my children, it's never been this high, okay? And even if the kids are being like really naughty or they're being really good, it doesn't switch. The amount of love and kindness and empathy and self-control is at an all-time high. And to your point, I think it's because of the amount of work I've been doing internally with myself. Mm-hmm. However, when you start to do some internal work, when you start to act accordingly to your values, like love and kindness and compassion and all these things, I was meditating one day and then I was like, I really love how I'm parenting my kids right now. But then internally, like I felt like this sadness. And it was almost like it's so hard to describe, but it's almost like I could feel like my 5-year-old self just like coming out of my body and just like sitting with me. And it's almost like that 5-year-old just like really needed like a hug. And what I find is that like I can't complain about my childhood. Like my mum and my dad would work so hard to provide for us. I grew up in a family where there was just so much love, so much affection between my parents. It was just wonderful. But at the same time, it would have been challenging coming from a country like Chile, not speaking the language, me and my sister and my brother being raised speaking English at school and then in a household having to speak Spanish, not having too much money or anything like that. It presented like lots of challenges. And so when you parent a particular way, so like you'll see definitely like on Instagram, and I know a lot of South American or a lot of like, say, I guess you'd say non-Anglo people would identify with, like, say if they've got parents from like Europe, like say Greek, Italians, Macedonian, South American, like the parents were pretty like full on, right? Especially like with a discipline. And so like I was saying to you, like I was shit scared to show my parents like my report, or like if it came down to sitting down at night to work out like some maths equations with my dad, I was like, oh man, this is going to be really fucking rough. You know what I mean? And it's just, you'd see the frustration come out, like the anger come out.
Yeah.
And it's funny. It is funny because I still remember it. But at the same time, you're like, fuck man, like I just needed some compassion at that moment.
Yeah.
I just really needed like some love and support in that moment because I'm obviously not getting the work. I'm obviously not figuring it out. So screaming and yelling at me isn't going to solve it. It's not going to help me get closer to the equation. And so when you parent in a new way, in a particular way, and you see those gaps, then you kind of see what was partially missing from your childhood. That hurts a little bit, you know? And then you realize, man, I got like a little bit of work to do here, like a little bit of like healing to do with this. And again, man, I love my mom and my dad and I'm so blessed to have them as my parents. But I was just reading you a part from this book. It's called Pieces Every Step by Thich Nhat Hanh, where he talks about parenting and how a lot of the times we can reflect and we can get mad at our parents for being a particular way. But if we can approach it with that same level of kindness and love as to potentially why they are like that, we can kind of see the seeds that were grown in them. We can kind of see that they are themselves a product of their own environment. You know, my grandparents would have raised my parents a particular way, and then their parents would have grown them in a particular way. And you can see that. And then it's our job now to kind of stop that. And I feel like I was talking to Timmy the other day about how, you know, if you look at intergenerational trauma, like it's our kind of responsibility now not to fill our kids' cups up with our shit. Like we have to now like filter it, we have to dilute it now. And we have to look at what are some of the amazing things that our parents did and what are the things that, you know, we can build and grow that was missing, not to their own fault, but just because they were a product of their own environment. And like, what can we do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I've been really, really proud of being able to do those things. But it was very painful.
Yeah.
It was very painful.
Yeah. I grew up in a similar kind of household, man, where it was very, I have no doubt that my parents loved me, but the relationship and I guess the mentoring was very fear-based and fear-driven, where it's like, you better get A's, you better not muck up, whatever. Everything was like directed through fear. And then I noticed, we were talking about this before as well, when you see like the dads that are around us, like yourself, Adam, Jonas, Michael, Seb, all the other dads that's in our community, it's very love-based. Mm-hmm. It's driven by love, right? There's still discipline. There's still mentoring for the kids, but it's driven by love, you know what I mean, rather than fear. Mm. And it's like, it's almost like our parents just didn't want to fuck up. But our generation accepts that in life, we are going to fuck up. We're going to fuck up all the time. But it's just being accountable for it and making up for it, you know what I mean? And I could tell that my parents just didn't want to make a mistake. They didn't want to fuck up. They didn't want us to fuck up. And like, you're right, it's ancestral curses passed down from generation to generation to generation. Yeah. And it's funny, like the people that are seen as the black sheep or the rebellions in the family are usually the ones that are trying to break those ancestral curses because what you're doing stuff that's out of the norm for everyone else, you know what I mean? So that's why it's like, sometimes your parents will judge you because you're stepping away and doing something differently as well. But it's like we always talk about, when you talk about your vibrational frequency, there's two extremes. Right up at the top end, the highest vibration is love and the lowest vibration is fear. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And it's, if you can look at it in a black and white way, every decision that you make, every word that you speak is either derived from fear or love. Yeah. That's the, when you said that, I related to that too, man. I couldn't have, I think I said in the last episode, I think I've had like maybe 10 conversations with my dad in my life and I'm 36. Do you know what I mean? Mm. We never could speak. Like if I had a bad day at school, I couldn't go back and be like, hey, mum, dad, this is what happened at school today. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And then I think about when I have kids, I would hate if my kids couldn't do that with me. Yeah, man. Do you know what I mean? I would hate that. Like,
I pride myself so much on that with Rose that like that Izzy and Conan can like come to us now like with any problem, like any little thing. And like Conan has this thing now where we'll ask him like, did you do this? And he's like, no, but we obviously know he did do it. And then Rose has this thing, she's like, look, if you tell me the truth, you won't get in trouble. He's like, yeah, I did it. Yeah. But you know, and I'm like, all right, well, we promise we can't get mad. And it's like that fine balance, but like today, like he made a mistake again. And then he was just with me and I'm like, mate, did you do this? And he's like, am I gonna get in trouble? And I said, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm just asking you, did you do this? And he's like, I did. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I'm like, thank you for telling me. And I'm like, but next time, like, if you need help, you just have to let me know. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's just such a contrast, to like parenting styles that, we're used to.
But, like if it was fear-based, right? And he knows he's going to get like yelled at or screamed at, right? Fair enough. There's like, we still need to teach kids that there's consequences for things, right? Decisions that we make. Yeah. Right? We still learn that as adults. There's 100%. Consequences for decisions that we make. But because the way you're mentoring your kids is through love, you're teaching them qualities by having that conversation. You're teaching him the principles of honesty. Yeah. And truth. 100%. Right? Whereas if he knows that you're going to yell and scream at him or even hit him and stuff, they're going to hide the truth to protect themselves. Correct. Like anyone would. Yeah.
Nah, man. Yeah. I love that, man. I really do.
It's beautiful, man. And like, and it's so true. Like everything just enhances when you prioritize that relationship with yourself. It's literally like the most important relationship. And even my relationship with God got so much better after I understood how to have a relationship with myself. Do you know what I mean? That is the one relationship where I was like, wow, I actually understood how to have a relationship with God, but I couldn't do that for 30 years because I wasn't understanding how to have that relationship with myself. That amplified like crazy afterwards. You know what I mean? It was very, again, just like my parents, I guess, it was very fear driven. Yeah. My relationship with God before that, like don't do this or like, like when you're a kid, like, oh, God is watching, oh, you're going to go to hell if you do this. And it was very fear driven, right? And then, like you said, like, during meditations, like you're trying to, you don't just, when you're meditating, like a mistake that people make is like sitting there and they think they're emptying themselves. But you're not meant to empty yourselves. You're meant to fill with like love, forgiveness, gratitude. You're filling, you're actually, you're not emptying it. You don't want to be nothing. You want to fill yourself with. And then when you leave that, you want to apply, like you said, the meditation part isn't what's going to fix the problems.
Correct.
The meditation is a moment to sit there and send your awareness to what's going on in your mind, your body, your soul.
Yeah.
Right? Then what you do after the meditation is what counts.
Correct.
Right? It's how you apply that self-awareness. Otherwise, you're just sitting down and sitting still for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
You're not actually doing anything with it. The personal development comes with what you do with that, right? You want your life to mirror your meditations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that, man. And I do find that when I meditate, so when I'm meditating now, like what I like to do is I like to do it outside, and I sit down like in a little corner, and the meditation that I use is like sound meditation. So I'm going to be the observer. I just want to listen. I don't want to label anything. So like, say for an example, if I listen to a bird or I can hear the trees moving, I'm just trying to listen. I'm not trying to label it.
Yeah.
If I hear a car going past, it might have been a car, it might have not been. I'm not trying to label it. I'm just trying to observe and listen. And so then I take note then when my brain starts to get distracted, and next minute I'm having an argument with someone in my head, and then I'm visualizing something else, and it's like, oh, I'm distracted right now. Okay, I celebrate that distraction. And I'm like, great awareness, good awareness that you were distracted. Let's bring it back to observing the outside environment and listening. Mm-hmm. And so I'll be doing that, like, and the skill in that is that, like, when I'm driving my car now and I'm not listening to any music, I'm just chilling, I'm just trying to drive, again, the brain is starting to think, hey man, you better plan that trip to Japan next year with the family, like this and that. It's like, wait a second, I'm spending time in my head right now.
Yeah.
Is this something that I need to like be working on right now? Nope, it's not. Okay, great awareness. Let's go back to being present and driving. Or, hey Johnny, you're feeling pretty angry right now. Like, are you sure this is the best way to react? It's probably not, okay? Okay, cool, let's respond instead. Let's like tune it down. And so that's what I find meditation has been useful for me, is like to help me observe, be aware of what's happening, and make better decisions that are aligned with my values.
And the one thing that I always hear from people is like that they can't meditate because they keep thinking, right? And the thing is, and I always tell everyone this, even when I run my group sessions, I always start with, you're not meant to switch off your thoughts. There's no off switch for your thoughts.
No.
You're constantly, even when you think you're not thinking, you're still thinking in your subconscious. And it's good. Thinking is the way that our nervous system releases stress. So we want to be thinking, but it's exactly what you said. I was talking to this Buddhist monk over at Wedderburn. Have you been to that
No, I have never
Buddhist
been
temple over there? It's really beautiful there. I went over there and I was just having a conversation with him, and I was asking him about meditation. And he described it the exact same way that you said. He goes, when you hear a sound, just know what it is and let it go. Know what it is and let it go. You hear a new sound, just know what it is and let it go. And it's so true. The moment that we start like getting fixated on a thought or trying to shut those noises out, like say you hear a car go past and you're like, oh, I'm trying to like avoid that sound. Or if you keep thinking about something and you're like, oh, why am I thinking about it? What you're doing is you're putting yourself in fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
Right? Which is the opposite of what you want to be doing when you're meditating. Again, like we talked about masculine energy and feminine energy, meditation is feminine energy. You want to be in a state of being, not a state of doing.
Yeah.
Right? When you're trying to shut out noise and shut out thoughts, you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's exactly what he said, and what you said, just flow with it, allow it to be there. Because in life, like again, we meditate so we can apply those principles of meditation to life,
Correct.
to everyday life,
Yeah.
responding rather than reacting, right? Being in a state of being, flowing. In life, it's never going to run smoothly. There's always going to be hurdles, obstacles. Every day is going to look different. What do we do then? Do you know what I mean?
Correct.
We
man.
still have to flow with it. And that's what meditation teaches you, which is why it's such a beautiful practice when people actually understand what it's about and how to do it. And
I feel like meditation it really expands like on your thinking. And so like, I wrote these things down and it reminds me of like, these are the kinds of thoughts that will pop into my head while I'm meditating. But then I'm like, you know what? I don't need to do anything with these thoughts right now.
Yeah.
I'll just go back to observing the sounds outside. But I get questions like, but what exactly is the self? What am I trying to make a relationship with? Like, what am I trying to build and grow within oneself? And like, we might say, you hear people say it all the time, like, you got to build a relationship with yourself. And it's like, okay, but what does that even mean? What does the like self mean? And that's why I wrote like here, so what are you exactly like? Am I my thoughts? Am I my emotions? Am I my past? Am I my memories? Am I this muscle and tissue, like this skeletal mass? Am I the observer of my internal and external experiences? Am I my actions that follow the observing? Like, who is my true self? And it's such a like deep philosophical question. Like, it really, really is like such a profound question. Like, I always tell people, like, I was talking to someone when I said, I forget what it was, we're having a training session and they were talking about their thoughts and, they were concerned by them. And I'm like, the reason why you're concerned about your thoughts is because you judge them. And I'm like, why do you judge like weather in your head? It's just like clouds. You don't sit outside and be like, that's a good cloud, that's a bad cloud. That cloud's not too perfect. That cloud's perfect. Like, you don't do that. It's the same thing like with our thoughts. Like, our brain is just a thought-provoking organ. That's what it's designed to do. And they're like, well, if I'm not my thoughts, what am I? And I'm like, well, how do you know that you've had a thought? And they're like, well, I can hear it. And I'm like, who can hear it? And they're like, well, I can. And I'm like, well, then I go, it's probably fair to say that you are the observer of your thoughts. Just as you observe clouds.
Yeah.
Like, how do you know that you've had a thought? And I'm like, what happens is a lot of the time is that we identify. So this is called like thought fusion or identity fusion, where we fuse ourselves to our thoughts. We fuse ourselves to that inner voice. And because that inner voice sounds exactly like us, it has like our whole life, we think we are that inner voice.
Yeah. It's like a narrator or something.
Yeah,
when you're hearing it.
But it is not.
Yeah.
A lot of the times that voice is our ego.
Yeah.
And what I like to look at is like the ego is like that, it's like that file sharing manager. It's just like trying to keep you safe. And so then you allow your ego to make decisions for yourself. And it always fucking backfires. Like, think about it, right? How many times has your brain been wrong? Like, how many times has your brain said to you, nah, man, you've been training so hard, Shane. Like, don't go to the gym this afternoon. You don't have to go. And so you recognize that. You're like, nah, I'm going to go anyway. So that you're not your thoughts. Like, you realize that this is just like weather in your head.
Yeah.
And so it might sound like this profound idea that, what do you mean I'm not my thoughts? Well, I'm like, well, you're not, because you observe them. Same with your emotions. People say, I'm depressed, I'm anxious. It's like, well, you're not depressed and you're not anxious. You are feeling depression. Yeah. You are feeling anxiety. You are feeling stress.
Yeah.
But we identify the self with those emotions. Again, they're just things that we feel.
Yeah.
But you are not those emotions.
So true, man. I've made a habit of that in the last 4 years. I'll try to never say, or sometimes I'll say it and I'll catch myself, but I'll never say I am sad. But even just positive thoughts, right? You don't want to say I am happy.
Correct.
Because then the moment you're not happy, you think something's wrong and you feel like you get really overwhelmed and you're trying to dig yourself out of this hole, but it's in that moment, you're in a state of happiness.
Correct.
Right? And it's okay that in an hour's time, you might be in a state of anger. Correct. Or a state of sadness, right? But those emotions, they come and go, they ebb and flow, right? But then it's the same, it's the same with the negative emotions, if you're gonna label them. It's the same with the positive emotions too. You've got to make sure that you understand that you don't have to chase happiness all the time as well. You're just like you were in a state of sadness or you were feeling sad, you're also in a state of happiness too. But it's that's an important thing as well that I stress to people, make sure you understand that, understand it across the whole spectrum of emotions too.
Yeah, no, and I love that, man. I really do. And I really try to do that now. It's like, I no longer really identify with what I'm feeling. It's like, oh yeah, I'm experiencing this. So like we'll have internal and external experiences. Like internal experiences will be like thoughts, feelings, emotions. External experiences will be like sensations, touch, weird physical sensations, weird physical symptoms, you know?
Yeah.
But we are none of those things. But we know that we are having those things because we are observing it. And so I also find that just like a problem that we can make is like just the way that we attach our identity to our brain stuff, to like the thoughts and feelings and emotions, we also like attach our identity sometimes purely like to one component like of our life. And I get this stuff from, again, I talk about him all the time, he's a great author, Brad Stulberg. He had this quote where he writes, the more you define yourself by any one activity, the more fragile you become. If that activity doesn't go well, or something changes unexpectedly, you lose a sense of who you are. But with self-complexity, you have developed multiple components to your identity. And so like he uses this house metaphor. I'll just quickly show it to you, Adam. So it's just like right there. You can see that? Yeah. So essentially like, let's just say you were to identify yourself with Soulflex. Mm-hmm. Shane is Soulflex. And so he uses this, the house metaphor. And let's just say your house has multiple rooms. But in your house with Soulflex, but with your house, you only have one room and it's Soulflex. You could purely identify yourself with Soulflex. And you see that athletes do this a lot. You know, if they're an Olympian, they're just an Olympian, okay? And so the problem is that if you have one room and then that room floods, you're going to be very disorientated. If Soulflex goes to shit, you lose all your members, all your clients, you get bad reviews, you're not getting new clients, man, you're going to be in an absolute chaos and disorder.
Yeah. What
they say to do with self-complexity in terms of having multiple components was like, and let's just like, we'll use, I wrote this one for myself. Let's just say, I'm not saying that that's what your house is like. I was just using it as an example,
no,
right?
I'm going to explain something in a second because it's so funny that I was actually having a conversation with someone about this, but keep going.
Okay. And so let's just say in my house, so it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's got 8 rooms.
Yeah.
Okay. There's one really big room and that's my parent room. Then there's another quite large room and that's my husband room. Okay?
Yeah.
And then there's another 6 rooms that are almost similar in size, but they're much smaller. And that's a career room. That's like a musical room. There's like a jiu-jitsu coach room.
Yeah.
There's a podcast host room. There's a friend room. And then there's a son and brother room.
Yeah.
So these are the different rooms that make up my identity that I can flow in between. So let's just say if things aren't going very well in my music room, I can easily flow into any other room.
Yeah.
Okay, while things are not too good, where I don't completely attach all my identity to one idea. And I find that's a mistake that a lot of us make. And that's a mistake that I actually made during COVID, where I felt like I was fighting the whole world. Mm-hmm. And I had like my Wolf Den Wolf Life hat on, and that's all I was.
Yeah.
And it's a huge fucking mistake.
Yeah.
You were going to say something?
No, yeah, it's funny that you brought that up, man, because I was having a conversation with one of my coaching clients. I'm going to give her a shout out, Rayanne. She listens to our podcast all the time. You know Rayanne.
Mm-hmm. She's a legend.
Adam, you met her as well. So, hey, Rayanne, thanks for always supporting the podcast. Glad that you love it. But I had a conversation with Rayanne last Thursday about attachments, right? Because we get attached to things. And same thing with Soulflex. Every now and then I'll feel my ego coming in to the business and I have to have that conversation with myself, right? And I was reflecting on myself and I was like, because this is like, especially when I started it, I was single, don't have any kids. So this was a big part of my life, right? This is the first time I'm starting a business. I used to work for as a school teacher before that. So this was like my baby, right? But then I also know that, and I say it all the time, that this is God's business and I work for him, right? I know how organic this business was formed and how God had a really big hand with everything and how it formed, right? And it was at a moment in my life where I was just really surrendering and letting things flow. And it was really beautiful. I was just seeing things manifest, and man, it was really easy. It was really easy. People tell me all the time how hard it is to start a business. This was really fucking easy because I didn't feel any pressure. Like, I honestly felt like I was praying and I was saying, God, take the wheel. You direct it, I'll just work for you. And it took so much pressure off it, right? And every now and then, like, I have to kind of check myself because I'll feel the ego coming in. And there was one point where, because the moment that I started this, I trademarked the logo, trademarked the business name, and people thought I was crazy. But I was like, no, I just really fucking believe in it. You know, like, I only had like one client and I was doing all that. And it was like a year into the business, and someone told me, it's like, hey, I found a Soulflex in Queensland. And I was like, no, they can't do that because I've copyrighted in Australia. You can't use the name for a gym. And I went on the website and I saw this lady had started a business called Soulflex. And then instantly I went into that ego mode and I was like, fuck that, this is my business. This is like, you know, the empire mindset. And then I was like, no. And then like, I called my lawyer and I was like, hey, I go, when we copyrighted, there was no business, right? I called Soulflex, like, yeah, not in Australia. There's like a drum company in America that do like drum kits and stuff, and it's called Soulflex, but there's no other health and fitness industry called. So I was like, hey, we need to write a letter to this lady, tell her like she has to, and he talked some options with me, what we could do. And then I was like, yeah, we're going to send this letter over to her, make sure that she changes her name or start a drum company. I don't know. And, I was about to hit the okay to tell them to send the email. And then I stopped and I'm like, look, okay, can you just give me a night to think about it? And I meditated over it. And instantly I got like a real big kick in the ass when I reflected on it. And I heard God's voice saying, why did you start this business? It was to help people. It was to heal people. This business was made from love, not fear, right? The moment I start defining myself with this business, that's when the ego comes in. That's when it's fear-based because I'm fearing that other businesses will take over me. Yeah. Right? That's not what this is about. This is about love. Yeah. Right? And I was like, wow, this lady is running I don't know what she's doing, but she was running like some kind of health and fitness thing over in Queensland. She's helping other people heal. Who am I to interfere with that? Do you know what I mean? This business doesn't define me. And the thing is, if you took this name away, you took this logo away, you took this gym away, you took all my clients away, I can still love, I can still heal. I don't need this business name and this studio and this logo to do that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? That's that whole attachment thing, right? Yeah. The purpose behind it is so much bigger than the physical things in here. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? The reason why I started this is so I can serve God and help people heal. Yeah. And whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, that was a purpose. And if I'm homeless living on the street, I can still do that. Yeah. I think that's beautiful, man. I just think like that's such fine-tuned awareness. So. Yeah. And man, I'm so guilty of like being fear-driven and not like love-driven or giving my things to God. And a lot of my stuff was always like, yep, let's get this shit out there. I want to be the first person to do this. I want to be the first person to do this. I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. Mm-hmm. And it was all about fear, man. It was all a flex. It was just, and that's why like, I love what you do with your business so much. And that's why I recommend your business to so many people. And I'm a personal trainer myself, but I recommend your business so much. It's just that I love your approach. I love what you do. When I look at, and I'm not trying to be judgmental, but I just need to be honest as well. And if something to me doesn't sit well, but when I look at what like other fitness companies do or other trainers do, it's all like, and again, I'm guilty of this, man. I used to run like certain challenges all the time and promote my results all the time, but I wasn't even promoting the results so much for the clients. I was promoting the results as a flex. Like, look how good I am. Yeah. Look what I can do for you. You know, I'm so good. That's why I can charge a certain amount of money. And that's just like ego. You know, that's what ego drives it. And then I'd put transformation after transformation after transformation. And then you think about how toxic social media is.
And upon reflection, I'm like, fuck, man, like, what was I contributing to? Like, how much body dysmorphia was I contributing to? How much poor eating did I contribute to? Like, because people are just chasing like this particular physique or a particular result. So, but I feel it, man, and I see what you do, and I think it's very obvious that your business operates in a way where you've handed the reins to God. Like, you can really see that.
Thank you, man.
Your ethos, you know, your values, your creed, like, you can tell that that's what drives it.
It's like, I mean, don't get me wrong, man. Like, I appreciate your authenticity just and how real you were. And like, just know I'm not perfect. I have to constantly have those conversations with myself, and I have to keep checking myself to make sure that I'm not. And that's part of that, having that relationship with yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like, we talked about this before we started filming. We were talking about, like, you know, what does that relationship with self look like? And I think you mentioned about what Mark Freeman was saying as well about seeing yourself as a friend.
Yeah.
Right? And the thing is, a lot of times as well, when people start developing self-awareness, they end up getting attached to getting better, right? And they start getting fixated and obsessed with getting better. And what that does is they put so much pressure on themselves, right? And we're always our own harshest critic. We put so much pressure on ourselves to get better. And prior to that self-discovery journey, we didn't have the self-awareness, so we didn't feel that pressure.
Yeah.
But the moment you realize, like, whoa, this is like, you know, this is why I say these things, this is why I do these things, this is why I act this way, wow. Then you're constantly aware of it, and you're kind of like putting your pressure to like get better each time and to not fuck up, because now you're aware that you are fucking up, right? But then I always tell people, like, you know, don't put that pressure on yourself, because like part of self-love and that relationship to self is, like Mark Freeman was saying, and like I'll get you to read it out later as well, but it's seeing yourself as your own best friend, right? And in the last episode, I talked about why I chose to be single for a long time is because I wanted to be my own best friend.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to be my own parent. And we talked about inner child, right? Inner child healing. I needed that time to really develop that relationship with myself. And the thing is, if one of my friends fucked up and made a mistake, I wouldn't be like, man, you're a dickhead, what are you doing? You know, I would treat them with love.
Yeah.
So why do I beat myself up then if I'm trying to treat myself like my own best friend? You know, would I speak to Albert or Wade this way? Would I speak to you this way if you came to me with a problem? So when I'm coming to myself with the problem, why am I beating myself up?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the best way. Like when you explained how Mark explained it, seeing yourself as your own friend or your own lover or your own child, you know, it's a really beautiful way to understand what it means to have a relationship to yourself.
Yeah. No, I love that, man. And so, and so again, like I was thinking about it, I'm like a lot. And so I've kind of like gotten down for me, like my own, and I feel like we can all define it very differently. Like, yes, we have different components of our identity, different rooms in our house. But then I was like, okay, so then what is my true self? And I'm like, well, then I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my feelings. I'm not my emotions. I'm not my skin and body. I'm not just like one thing. Like, I'm like, well, then I'm the observer of everything in my life. And then I'm also my actions. That's how I like to look at who the self is. It's like, I'm the observer of what is happening internally and externally. And then I am the decision maker, the things that I decide to do with that information. And so it's like, okay, well then how do I build a better relationship, you know, with myself? And so Mark Freeman also has this amazing tool. He's been recently doing this a lot in workshops in Europe. And I started drawing one at home. I should have brought it. I'll bring it next time. And he's saying sometimes it's really helpful to look at ourselves like a garden. And what do you want to grow? Okay? And so for me, with my garden, so I just, you know, drew like this plain garden. And it's like, well, what seeds do I want to plant? What are the things that I want to nourish and grow? And how do I feed those things to grow? So let's just say I want to grow, you know, my parenting skills. I want to grow how I'm as a husband. Let's just say I want to grow my relationship with God. Let's just say I want to grow the seed of not making so many fear-based decisions, but rather value-based decisions. Let's say I want to grow my meditation skills. And it's like, so you put all these little plants, all these little individual things that you're trying to grow. And it's like, okay, well, what's going to nourish those seeds? Like, what is it? Like, what nourishes parenting skills? What nourishes your relationship with your loved one? What nourishes your meditation skills? What nourishes my ability to switch the fuel from fear to love? What nourishes my relationship in surrendering my problems to God? Like, what are the things that nourish and fuel those things? And I just think it's just such a beautiful and simple way of looking at things in terms of building a relationship with yourself. And the seed that you might want to grow in there as well is being a better friend to myself, being more love and kind to myself, healing my inner child. And I feel like when you look at it as a system like that, like at that garden, this overview, it's just so helpful. And then you can start to attach actions. And then from those actions, you can attach like little mini goals. And it's like, week 1, I'm going to do all these little separate things. And then week 2, I'm going to build on from that. And then you just keep on building this beautiful garden within yourself. And then you start to build this really beautiful relationship with yourself. And that's just like something that now I'm starting to do. And it is challenging though, because again, the reflection piece is just so hard, because sometimes you're like, well, you literally have to sit down with a piece of paper and be like, what am I unhappy with? And then when you kind of start to think about it, you're like, oh, okay, I can see why I'm unhappy with that. But another key point in all of this as well is that once you've gotten the garden beautiful and blossoming, yourself, well, you need to maintain that. And I find what happens is that we allow gardens to go to shit, and then we got to try to fix them, and then we get the gardens really beautiful, and then we abandon them.
Yeah.
And it's like the work is like continuous. The work is continuous in what we do. And so for me, I like that whole concept, that idea of seeds. Yeah. It's like, okay, what seedlings can I plant, and how am I going to water them? Like, what's going to produce like the most amount of growth?
It's very biblical too. There's so much talk in the Bible about harvesting seeds and
I was going to like get to some stuff relating to Jesus and that.
Yeah.
But I was going to ask Ads, like I wanted to get Adam's perspective on in terms of like the self. How do you view the self, Ads? Like, what does it mean to you if someone says like, so then who are you? Like, who is your true self? Like, how do you like to look at it? Like, do you like that garden analogy or?
Yeah, I do. And I also really like the house analogy too. Like when you boys were just thinking about it then, I was like, crap, what would my house be? And at the moment, you boys know how busy I've been lately. I almost feel like I've built a granny flat out the back of the house, which is purely just work. Yeah. And within work, there's like 5 different things that's keeping me busy, and it feels like an effort to get back into the house at the moment to do the dad room and the husband room and everything else. Yeah, so if I was, the self is, especially this year when I'm just reflecting on, as you guys were talking on my journey, it's changed so much, right? Because we got a little dude at home now who's 15 months, and I've been going through this whole journey of it's not about me anymore. I have to give it all to Connor. I have to give it all to my son, which is not true, right? Because it's the fitting the gas mask analogy, right? Where if the plane's going down, you got to put your gas mask on first before you can save your kids. Because if you're not alive, then they're definitely not going to be alive at the end of it. And and you guys have had many, many conversations with me on all this sort of stuff. But if my gas mask is things like getting to jiu-jitsu to get it out, supporting for my family and going out and doing that, and still having time to then, to fill up all these cups. Like, I think at the moment my garden is so overrun and so messy.
Needs some weeding done.
Bro, and there's like, I've spilt seeds from one garden and the other. There's like roses all the way through my tulips, and there's like, it's so messy at the moment. And it's actually something I've been reflecting on with Shane lately that I think we were just talking about this morning when we took Connor to the markets, where
Mad invite again.
bro, from what I hear, you came to the party last night. You needed to rest after it. And I was just saying that like every week comes around, and I say to myself, like next week it'll be easier. You know, I'm like, this week's hard. Next week, I'm sure it'll be easier, and then it's not. And then I go, oh, well, next week it'll be better. I'll have more time. And then it's not. And then, oh, it's okay. Next week it'll be easier. So I've done that for so long now, for the last few months, that I have to sit back now and have a look at my garden with the weeding tool and with the shears and everything else, and go, all right, I think something needs to be weeded from this garden, because it's not sustainable. Like, and I shouldn't be going through life every week thinking, it's all right, next week will be better. I'll have more downtime next week. I'll have more time to reflect on myself, to give back to my family next week, and then next week, and then next week. Because eventually it'll be 3 years from now, and I'll still be saying, I'll get to it next week. It's all right. Next week will be better. So in terms of my garden and my house at the moment, if it's the house analogy, there's dust everywhere. And everything's dirty. I've got to clean it. If it's gardening, it's all weeding and everything's interlapping. But yeah, I've just had my wife went away this weekend, and I think forcing myself then to not do any work this weekend was such a blessing in disguise for everything that's gone on, because I was able to just sit back and be a dad and just solely focus on looking after Connor. And there was just a beautiful simplicity in it. And after this weekend, I've kind of gone, I just need more of this in my life. I just need a bit more simplicity.
I love that.
There's too much overlapping at the moment, and I want to just be able to, like, when I'm working, I'm working.
Yeah.
And when I'm dadding, I'm giving full to my dadding. And when I'm a husband, I'm a husband. And yeah, it was just beautiful. I had a great weekend with the little dude. Even if he didn't want to sleep for me last night, it was great. Yeah.
It's crazy, man. Success can be interpreted in so many different ways, you know what I mean? Like a lot of times, like, people see success as like, you know, how hard you work and how much money you're achieving. But, you know, that time that you got with Connor, you know, that's a level of success as well.
Yeah,
and I think
man.
that sometimes, like, as men, like, it's natural that we want to protect and provide for our partners, right? Like, when we're talking about this as well, like, I think last week, we go into hustle mode because we want to make sure that there's food on the table. We want to make sure that bills are being paid. We want to make sure that there's a roof over the head for our family, right? It's in our nature to be protectors. But then women want that security. They want that security. But then it's not just that physical security. They need that emotional security. They need that spiritual security.
Yeah.
They need that like that mental security as well. And sometimes, you know, we need to find that balance of, like, working so we can pay the bills and, you know, put food on the table and stuff as well. But it's also having that time with them and allowing them to, I guess, share that conversation or that time with you, because they need that as well. And I know even like with Lorna, like the last few weeks, she's been having a rough few weeks, man. Big shout out to Lorna. Like, she's such a strong woman, man.
She's a
Just
legend.
like all our partners are as well. But like,
Thank you for the potato gems.
yeah, she come
Thank
out
you for helping me tap into my feminine energy
as we were
with this teacup.
setting up. Yeah.
I was like, all right, I dig it, man. Pink's my favorite color, to be honest. But yeah,
I love that we were setting up for the podcast and Lorna brings out chicken nuggets and potato gems. I feel like we're having like a little sleepover, like
I was like, who brought the Nintendo?
golden eye and shit.
Yeah.
But she's had a rough few weeks, which is why I ended up like last minute throwing a party last night.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. We missed you last night, bro. But
it was awesome.
Legit, Friday night, I was just like, you know what? We need to be around good people. We just need that energy.
Yeah.
Sort it up, because like I've been spending a lot of quality time with her. Like the last few weeks, my priority has been her, right? Sometimes I have to shift that priority to work, sometimes to other things, to friends, whatever. But the last 2 weeks, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to focus on her because, and that last episode that we recorded helped me so much, man. Like, we recorded that episode and it came at the right time because literally the next day, we filmed on a Sunday. That Monday, I was at 2%, Lorna was at 2%, and I could feel like that tension rising. And like, we almost just got into like this huge fight. And then I just remembered what we talked about, you know, that it's not 50-50.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really helped me. So like, I'm hoping other people at home listen to that podcast and help them because that really helped me. But, you know, when you're talking about like that energy to give, right? Like that whole, when you're in the airplane and you got to put that mask on for yourself. I was looking into the Bible and I was thinking, what does the Bible say about relationship to self, right? Is anything in there as well? And when Christ talks about relationships, he says, you always put God first, then you put other people first, then yourself. Yeah. And Jesus did that. He lived that life, right? He was always serving, giving other people, washing his disciples' feet, right? But I think, you know, something that came to mind as well was that in order for you to give to other people, you need to provide for yourself because you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So, yeah, like I think it is a priority to serve other people and making sure that you are giving to your community, giving to people as well. But you literally can't do that if you have nothing to give. So that's why you got to kind of seek that balance. You got to make sure that you're giving that time. And people feel so guilty for doing that, right? Because it's like when you've got that, you know, half an hour where you want to just kind of sit down or go to the beach just to reflect, you're thinking like, oh, I could be doing that job that I have to do, or I could be like, you know, helping my wife with the kids, or I could be, you know, hustling and getting more clients, whatever. People feel guilty for taking that time to themselves, right? But really, it's not selfish at all. It's the most selfless thing you can do, because then when you come back from that, you have so much more to give, right?
Yeah, one of the other reasons I think you're with Lorna so we recorded on Sunday. I remember you telling me about that experience you had with Lorna on the Monday. Yeah. I actually had my own experience on the Tuesday. That then I think when I trained with you on Wednesday, we both spoke about our experiences.
Sound like a Craig David song.
I know, right? Yeah. And then on Thursday,
go on there, right?
Yeah, and I remember like then on the Wednesday we got together and spoke about it, and we're like, God, why? These two amazing things happened. I was training here. I was on that squat rack over there, getting demolished. And yeah, I remember we like said like, damn, both of our partners have gone through these, or we've had these experiences with our partners 2 days after we recorded a relationship episode. We need to do another episode. And I remember mine came from Collie when I finally took one of those moments to train jits, and I did Johnny's class on a Tuesday night. And I came home from the class demoralized because I don't get the chance to train as much these days with Connor and everything. Life is a bit busier, but like there's people that I used to roll with at Jits that I was really competitive with, and we were very, very close. And there was someone that I rolled with, and he'll know who it is because I messaged him after the fact to congratulate him. As soon as he hears this, he'll know. But I came home and Collie could see it in my eyes as soon as I walked through the door. I got absolutely demolished by him in this session, and I was so defeated because I remembered the 12 months ago when I'd rolled with him, it was actually, we were sort of on the same wavelength, and it just showed me how having to take a step back a little bit over the last year with Connor being born, how much, not that I've lost from my jiu-jitsu game, but just that I haven't advanced as quick as what I did previous to Connor being born. And I came home shattered, and Collie could tell as soon as I walked through the door, she was like, oh, it didn't go so well. I was like, and I explained to her it's just another one of those things where not getting hours on the mat, and everyone else is advancing so much, and this guy just floored me. It was not even close. I may as well have been a white belt and he was a brown belt. I got demolished. And she, you know how you said Lorna had that moment with you where she said it floored you, and she said it's not you and I versus each other, it's us versus the problem. And
Yes,
you
yeah.
stepped back and went, whoa,
Yeah.
like such great advice. Same thing. She, without even taking a breath, just said, well, why don't you congratulate him on his growth rather than focusing on what you feel you've lost? Just like, he's obviously been putting in the work. He's turning up and he's doing really, really well. Why don't you like change that mindset of yours to go back to him? And I thought about it and I was like, that's like the wisest thing anyone could have said to me in this moment. And yeah, straight away I messaged him and I was like, bro, I just want to say congrats. Like I had nothing tonight. You had me. And yeah, I just want to congratulate you on how well you're doing and whatever. And that all came from Collie, like, because she understands how much jits means to me and how much of an outlet I need it to be. So when she saw that it wasn't, you know, for her too, she's sacrificing her time by letting me go in a way, because she's then being solo mum for the night so I can fill my cup. So when I come home and it's not filled and I've been demoralized by it, it floored me that she had that response.
It's mentioned in this book as well, in Pieces Every Step by Thich Nhat Hanh, that like we can transform like our knots. Like let's just say you had that knot of like disappointment, or a knot of envy, or a knot of jealousy, or a knot of like just sadness. But you're able to, like if you keep amplifying on it and just focusing on those things, that knot gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And by you then getting such great advice by Collie, like you were able to transform that knot of disappointment into a knot of like love, into a knot of like kindness, and you didn't allow it to tighten up. But in saying that as well, like that's why I always tell, like, because you guys are my students, like I always tell you, like, and I tell all the students, I feel like jiu-jitsu is one of those sports where we get the metrics wrong. We think that we measure growth and success in the sport about how well we do in rounds, and it's not. I would see it the other way. If I was you, I'd be reflecting and going, you know what? I've had so much on my plate. I'm a brand new dad. I've barely slept this year. You know, I'm in a young marriage with my partner. There is so much uncertainty with my work. I barely get to train, but I still turn up. I still turn up. I still do the work. I don't knock down any rounds, and I'm still here. That is the growth. You know what I mean? Like that is like the beautiful part. And that's why you can tell between people who train, like who measures their success or their growth in jiu-jitsu by their rounds. You can tell. And then you can tell the people that measure their growth and success in jiu-jitsu just by turning up and being a good training partner. You know? Like, so yeah, don't bash yourself down too much, man. Like, it's good that you're happy for that person, but at the same time, man, look, you know what's fucking easy? Turning up and training jiu-jitsu. It is. It's pretty easy. Do you know what's fucking hard? Getting up multiple times a night, feeding your child, having a child sick, getting every single type of cold and flu all throughout the year. That's fucking hard. Starting a business, scraping money around, trying to get things to work, like together, that's fucking hard. Still being loving with your partner, still trying to maintain some form of intimate relationship, that's fucking hard. Like we discredit the real things that we do. Like that's the hard stuff. Turning up to jiu-jitsu and doing 5-minute rounds, that's nothing. And that's why like when people were saying to me, like when I competed at Worlds, they're like, I just can't believe how you were so relaxed. I'm choosing to enter a competition. Like if you could choose for your son to be sick, you would never choose that. Or they're like, I can't believe you're fighting these giant monsters. I'm like, this is easy. The amount of shit I've had to deal with in my life, I'm choosing to do this. I would never choose to go through mental health issues. I would never choose to have a sick child. Like that's the hard shit, man. Like turning up every day. And the fact that you still come to training when you can, you still, you know, you train with me every Tuesday. Man, that is the work. That's the hard part, you know? So, and remember, we're all on individual journeys. You know what I mean? Everyone's an individual, like on the mats in terms of, yeah, we are a team, but you know, when I like assess you guys for your gradings, it's like, I look at you as you. Here's Adam, married, new baby, doesn't get to train too much, has committed himself to doing private sessions, still tries to do 1 to 2 sessions a week, has so much going on in his life. That's what I base it off. You know what I mean? So, but I think it's beautiful that you did turn around and message that person. So that's a testament to your personality, man. But don't beat yourself too much about it.
You should give him a shout out.
Yeah, well, it was Evan. He's
a beast on the mats.
Bro.
Yeah.
I mean,
Evan's the best, bro.
Yeah,
He's such a good
100%.
dude. He's man, he's a fucking beast. He's a weapon.
Yeah,
he's
dude.
so good. But like
And he trains hard, dude.
yeah, but he's such a good role.
Yeah,
Man, we're talking about this before. Like there's people that you're kind of like iffy about rolling with, but there's people that, you know, you're still gonna get like a challenging role, but it's safe and you trust him. He's one of those guys, man. I love rolling with Ev.
big shout out to Evan.
Yeah. But that's where that analogy of the rooms comes in really handy, right?
Man.
Because jiu-jitsu is just that one room, but like, you know, what are you doing as a business owner? What are you doing as a dad? What are you doing as a husband? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many different rooms. That's really powerful. I love that.
Yeah. I was gonna like, because you was mentioning something about how in the Bible it's talking about relationships, like with oneself. So I was doing some research as well. And I found these things and I thought they were really beautiful. And again, when I'm reading the Bible, when I'm trying to look for information, I always like to look for information, if I can, directly from Jesus, if I can.
Yeah.
And so in terms of denying the self, I found that in Matthew 16:24, Jesus said that if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. So like this is encouraging his followers to put aside selfish desires and submit to God's purpose. And if you look at God's purpose, it's all about love and kindness and care, you know? Then loving others as yourself. So when you were talking about loving others as yourself, I wrote this down. It's Matthew 22:39, Jesus says, the second greatest commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. So this underscores that self-love is important, but it should lead to loving others with equal care and attention. So if you love yourself, if you care for yourself, if you are kind to yourself and not bash yourself up because you have a bad jiu-jitsu round, then you can show others so much, like you can show others equal love and affection, okay? Then I've got here humility. I found in Matthew 23:12, Jesus says, whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. So Jesus encourages a posture of humility over self-promotion.
Yeah.
And that's that whole ego stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I used to always walk around like, and I would say it mucking around, but I think I started to believe it for a while. I would be like, oh man, I'm fucking killing the game. Killing the game. I was like, oh fuck. So cringy. But anyway.
That's the reference I read last week, but the version I had said the honored will be humbled and the humbled will be honored.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's it's so true, man. And it's even at that thing that you said just then, what was it? The love others like you as you love yourself.
Yeah.
And if you can imagine, if someone has a really negative view of themselves and holding toxicity inside them, imagine how that's going to be projected externally.
Correct.
Right? But then if you embrace love and compassion within and for yourself and forgiveness for yourself, sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself.
Yeah, man.
Right? We put so much pressure on ourselves, right? That's projected as well. And when you talked about the knots, obviously, like I think we talked about this the other day when you showed me that book as well, about those knots that you keep in you as well, right? So obviously Buddhism is derived from Hinduism. The first ever Buddha, Siddhartha, was a Hindu, right? In Hinduism, they call it Kundalini, right? And they say that energy that you're not addressing and just kind of like, I guess, brushing away or sweeping aside, because the thing with energy, right? Energy can, it can't be created and it can't be destroyed, but it can be transformed.
Yes.
Right? Think about like water turning to ice, right? We can transform energy. So when we just brush things away or avoid, that energy has to go somewhere and it becomes stagnant, and they call that Kundalini, right? And they say that Kundalini energy just coils up like a snake in the base of your spine, right? And what happens is the longer we leave it, the tighter and tighter it coils, like an old rusty spring, and then it becomes harder to break. And the scary thing is, right, If I fall over and cut my arm, I can see the blood and I'm like, oh shit, I need a Band-Aid. But we can't see that stagnant energy inside of us. And because we can't see it, it just sits there and it gets projected into other things. It gets projected into your relationships. It gets projected into your mindset, the way that you view life, the lens that you wear, and even your relationship to yourself, right? Because that energy is just there. And that's why it's like those knots. And there's a meditation that I do. It's actually inner child meditation. I want to do a meditation for you, man, one day.
Fuck yeah,
We'll do a one-on-one soon. But
I'd love that.
I get them to breathe through their body, different parts of their body, right? And then what we do is like, I tell them to put their hand over anywhere they feel tension, right? And then we start to breathe into it. And then we start to give that spot in the body where that tension is, we start to give it a physical appearance. So I'm like, give it a color, then give it a shape. Now pretend that you've taken it out and hold it in your hand. Give it a texture as if like you've got a pet and you're like touching it, right? And then I want you to feel what emotions are attached to that, whether it's anger, sadness, fear, envy. And then I lead them into a meditation where they picture themselves at one point in the past as a child where they felt those emotions, right? A time, if it was anger, go back to a time when you were a child and you felt that anger and visualize yourself sitting there holding that pet that you're holding. And go have that conversation with yourself, right? Don't look at time as linear, look at time as parallel. That version of you is still here.
Yeah.
That child version of you is still here. And sit with him or her and give him or her the comfort that they needed, right? Because at that time when they were crying in their room, they didn't have that person giving them the love that they needed, right? Be that person for them now. Be the parent for them. Go talk to them. If they need a hug, give them a hug. If they need words of advice or encouragement, give them that. If they need compassion or forgiveness, give them that. And that's how you heal those wounds. Do you know what I mean? And like, man, like I'm getting emotional talking about it because it's helped me so much doing that.
I love that, man.
It's really helped me heal a lot of emotions with my dad doing that exercise and develop empathy for my dad. Through that. But yeah, that inner child healing, man, it's so freaking powerful.
It's very powerful.
It's so powerful, man. And, you know, like it's rare that people don't open their eyes with tears after that because they are feeling that release.
Yeah.
Those tears are a good thing. It's that release that was stagnant for a long, long time that wasn't addressed.
No, I love that, man. When we're talking about, like the things that Jesus said, the other point I had was in terms of like the self was like losing life to find it. So I got here like in Matthew 10:39, Jesus states, whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for me, for my sake, will find it. So again, like this highlights that paradox that true fulfillment comes from letting go of selfishness to follow God's will. And then I just wrote this point that through these teachings, Jesus redefines the self as something that gains meaning and purpose through surrender to God and service to others. And so I was thinking about this stuff in my garden. And I'm like, okay, so the seeds that I'm planting in this garden to grow myself, to build that relationship with myself, what are those? Do those seeds have anything to do with surrendering to God and servicing to others? And so if I'm looking to build seeds of love and kindness and empathy, if I'm looking to build seeds of non-judgment, if I'm building seeds of healing like my own self, like my own past traumas, if I'm looking to build that seed of being able to trust God, trust His plan, surrender the control, drop the ego, then it's in line with everything that Jesus is teaching me. Again, encouraging His followers to put aside selfish desires to submit to God's purpose. Encouraging yourself that, encouraging that, yes, it's important to love yourself so that you can love others equally. Okay?
Yeah.
In terms of humility, so can I grow seeds of humility so that, I'm not just all about self-promotion. And so I use these things now to help picture this garden that I'm trying to grow.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my coach, Mark Freeman, before, and he sent me some notes because I was telling him that we're doing this podcast tonight. And again, he said, just dynamite information. He's like, I approach being myself in the same way as something like being a friend or being a partner. The relationship with the self is a relationship. It's an ongoing practice of care and discovery and support. It is that openness to discovering what it means to be myself in this context, just like I'd want to be a good friend or a good partner in whatever situation. And so again, I'll apply that information to like my garden. And it's like, okay, in terms of growing this garden, it's like, what am I trying to discover here? You know, how am I trying to support myself better? How am I building a better relationship with myself?
Yeah.
And it's a profound thing. It really, really is, because
that's a really good way to justify taking that time for yourself too, right? Like if you see yourself just like that, so if you see that relationship with yourself just like you would any other relationship, imagine if your friends didn't make time for you and you keep trying to be like, hey man, let's hang out. And you're like, yeah, next time, or I'm busy. Yeah. Eventually you're going to drift away. You're going to disconnect, right? Same with your partner. If you're just like in work mode and you're not taking your partner out on dates or just sitting down and having conversations with her, eventually that relationship's going to become damaged. You're going to disconnect. Yeah. And it's the same thing with yourself. When you're not making that time for yourself, what's going to happen? You're going to disconnect, right? It's so true. It's so good, man.
It is, man. Yeah. And it really is beautiful. And I know for me, like, you know, I was talking to you a lot this week that like a big seed in myself that I'm trying to grow in terms of relationship is being able to surrender completely to God, but at the same time, not being so hard on myself in struggling to let go of that control. Because like that control has always been this thing that I hold on to because I think I'm preventing bad things from happening.
Yeah.
And I loved it how you messaged me and you were like, you know, you were telling me that surrendering to God is a skill. And just like any skill, we need to practice it. Like we need to put it into practice. It's not gonna be like, yeah, I surrender all my problems to God. Oh, I'm cured. It's not like that, you know. And and I think I was looking at it like that a bit. To be honest, I was like, okay, I was like so confused as like, how can people just like surrender? How can you just hand it over? How can you just be okay with that? And then you said something else that was really beautiful, and I connected the dots. And I was like, I'm struggling to surrender to God completely because I haven't been willing to put God above everything else. I haven't been able to put God above myself, my children, my wife, my family. And so the reason I haven't been doing that is because I think my plan's better. I think my control's better. And like, it's hard as a dad, like, and I think we get caught up sometimes with the wording of like surrender and putting God above everything else. We think that we're abandoning our family, but what we're actually saying by putting God first is that your plan is better than mine. And I feel like a really good way to make God laugh is just to tell him your plans of the future. You know, because he's got his plans for you. Yeah. And so I just connected those dots the other day, like the other night actually. I was like, I think I've been really struggling to surrender to God because I was scared to mutter the words, I put you first. I was scared to say that. I felt like I was abandoning my family. I felt like I was abandoning my children and my wife. But then I realized I'm like, oh, I'm not. I'm actually doing this for them as well because I'm saying it's your way and I'm okay with that. And then that just made sense the other night. And so I've been meditating a lot on that and I've been praying a lot about that. And it was like a really beautiful like awakening. It was a really beautiful realization because like, let's just say in the past, I would have like wanted to have the most amazing things for my children, in part for them, but in part for my ego. But by putting God first and his purpose and allowing him to be the things that nourish my garden, then I can truly say to myself, well, why am I making these decisions? Why am I buying this for? Like, what am I trying to prove here? Is it really for them, for their best? Or is this an ego-based decision?
It becomes your anchor, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
And so I really struggled with that, man. Like, I was always so scared to mutter the words like that, I put you first, because I felt like I was a bad dad. I felt like I was a bad husband. But it was just that I didn't understand it.
The irony is it'll make you a better dad and a better husband, right?
But that's what I feel like. Man, I used to like...
It's scary though.
It is, man. But like,
100%.
I used to find these things cheesy, you know, where people would be like, you know, I was doing these actions and I felt the Holy Spirit through me. And I'd be like, yeah. I just thought it sounded like bullshit, to be honest. But to be like, honestly, like the other night, Izzy was having nightmares. I hadn't been sleeping well the last couple of nights. Rose hadn't been sleeping well the last couple of nights. And I don't know what happened, man. I was just so loving and kind. This is like 2 a.m. I got to get up in 2.5 hours for work. And I was like so loving. I was so kind. I was so supportive. And I was like, oh, baby, like, it's okay. Like, you're allowed to have nightmares. I'm like, let's just run through it a little bit. Like, you know, what are you scared about? Like, I just approached it like just so gently that even Rose said to me, she's like, she fell asleep by the way that I was talking to Izzy. Yeah, like, and I know that's why I was going to sound cheesy, but I was like, I honestly felt like God was like talking through me.
Yeah.
And then it felt like I was giving her, because I struggled with nightmares as a kid a lot, but then it felt like as I was giving her those words, I was giving it to my 5-year-old version of myself.
Yeah.
And he could like feel those words. And so it was like a really like beautiful moment. And I feel like that's where the magic happens. Like, you know, like you pray for like, you know, I'll always pray to God and I'll be like, you know, I pray to you, God, that you help me be more loving, you help me be more kind, allow me to be, you know, a positive conduit for your message. And you're just not sure how it's going to transpire, like how it's going to come out. And that's how it's been coming out, like in the most loving, caring, supportive ways. And like, I know people will be like, oh, it should be pretty easy to talk to your kids nicely. But I'm like, when you're not sleeping much and when you got to get up in 2.5 hours and your kids won't settle down, the last thing you want to do is to be calm. But I just have felt like this calmness just come over me.
That's exactly it, man.
And just be like, and like
peace.
And just like how I tell, you know, I speak to God and I'm like, can I give you my problems? I feel like I was like saying to Izzy, I'm like, give me your problems. Let's talk about it. And let's be cool about it. And it was the funniest thing. Yeah, Rose was like, she fell asleep from it. And then 30 minutes later, Izzy's like having dreams and she's like laughing in her dreams. She's having like a really fun time. So it's like a really beautiful moment.
You know, like when you think about your family, right? You're the leader of the tribe, but then who leads you, right?
Correct.
So that hierarchy, it's always God at the top of the household, then the parents, then the kids, right?
Yeah.
And even like with Lorna, like she suffers from anxiety as well. And when she first moved in here with me, because we got the park over there, like we get heaps of people walking through at night, and she would get really worried about like break-ins and stuff as well. And as soon as she'd hear something, I would automatically be like, I'd go out the front yard to check just to reassure her. And I'm like, yeah, there's no one there, right? Just so she knew that she was protected. But then it came to it where I was like, you know what? I go, I can protect you from a lot of things, but there's some things that I won't be able to protect you from, like illness. Like, you know, she went through a bit of a stint where we had to go to the hospital quite a bit and because of her migraines. And then as men, we want to be the protectors. We want to protect. Even our ego wants us to be the ones to answer all the problems.
Yeah.
But then God will teach us. There's some problems that we can't handle by ourselves.
Correct,
right?
man.
There's someone needs to lead us. Someone needs to protect us, and that's Him. And there was one night where we heard a noise, and I was like, you know what? I will go out and check for you, but something that we should do is pray, because there's someone that can protect you way more than I ever can, and that's God, right? And that was like, I had to practice a bit of humility to say that. I almost didn't want to say it because I wanted to know that, hey, I'm your man.
Correct.
But like God can protect her so much better than I ever can.
Yeah.
With so many other things. And so we prayed. And then she went to sleep. And then it's funny, the next morning I went out and then there was a white feather on our driveway. And I knew straight away that it was a message from God saying that this house is protected. And then that feather didn't move. Like for the whole week, it just kept getting closer and closer to the house, like the wind was carrying it. And then I think like 4 days later, it was on the front porch right by the doorstep. And then what I did was I just stuck it in the soil, and it's still there. And that was like almost a year ago.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, man, that white feather hasn't moved. And with all the wind that we've had as well, it's still there. And I always remind Lorna of that. Like, I remember that white feather. That's God letting us know, hey, I've got you. You know what I mean? But it's crazy, man. I think I was going to share this as well. The other day I put an Instagram story up on this podcast.
Yeah.
And I was asking people, I'm like, what's important to you in a relationship? Or what's the most important quality in a relationship? And I just thought I'd share some of the answers. So Caroline said honesty.
Yeah.
Someone said respect. Georgia commented and said communication is 100%. My relationship has been amazing since we sat down and talked. What would you say for you is the most important quality in a relationship? Doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, just relationships in general.
I'd probably have to say, yeah, honesty.
Honesty?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ads, what about you?
Sorry, it's firing up the camera. Yeah.
No, that's okay. Do you want me to share mine first then, and then
Yeah, what's yours?
come back to you with the camera? Yeah. So put your shirt back on too, man. I don't know what you're doing over there. You know what? Like for me, a big one is communication. But again, the talking and the listening part of it. And I was telling Adam this the other day.
Actually, I'll change mine. I think I'd say communication too.
Communication.
Yeah, definitely.
And I was telling Adam this the other day, and one time, because Lorna was like a really like, she's seen as a naughty kid growing up, and she was really defiant, and like if someone told her not to do something, she'd want to do it and stuff. And when she'd get in trouble, like people didn't know how to, I guess, speak to her. And sometimes when she gets like, because she can be a bit of a hothead, she'll fire up. And then when she does, I see her inner child, right? I can see the child in her. It's weird. Sometimes I look at her and I can see both versions of her. I can see this beautiful woman standing in front of me, but then I see that child as well.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful, man, when I see that inner child in her. And she said to me, like, Ashley today, she just goes, you make me feel so safe.
That's beautiful, man.
And bro, and then she said, she goes, my inner child loves you. And bro, like I fucking almost cry every time I think about that when she said that. Like I was like, wow. And then I started thinking like, yeah, communication is important, but then that safety.
Yeah, man.
Safety is so important in all aspects, not just physical safety. Like, yeah, I'll go out and check to see if there's someone in the front yard or whatever, but that emotional safety, that spiritual safety, that mental safety, and like that is so important as well. But yeah, how about you, my man?
Yeah, so now that all the technical issues
your shirt's back on.
Sort out, my shirt's back on. I've had
I don't know
myself
why I sit there naked for. It's so weird.
I've had myself some nuggets and potato chips.
These artists, man.
Communication is so important. I think we touched on it last episode, especially with like Connor now. Like Colleen and I have had to really work on that. But I think I was talking to you guys just before the podcast started too. I think it's about finding those moments to still be impressed by your partner is such a cool thing. Like that moment that I described earlier where Collie was, I came home from jits and I was shattered and she had this beautiful bit of wisdom for me. Like that impressed the hell out of me.
Yeah,
and
man.
Like it's almost like you fall in love with your partner then more and more every day kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or you fall in love with them again. Like it's a series of long-lasting relationships. You're constantly falling in love with the person over and over again.
That conversation she had with you made you a better person that day. Do you know what I mean? That's a powerful woman that can do that. You know what I mean? Like, and women just have this quiet strength about them where like, I feel like, we get all the glory and stuff, but man, we'd be nothing without them by our side. And it's that quiet strength, that quiet leadership behind you, like those little conversations they have. Just it was so powerful what you said, man. It's a strong woman that you have.
Yeah, totally. She's the best. She's amazing. And I feel like it's a good way to, if people talk about keeping the spark alive or whatever, like I think if you do look at it that way, you'd find ways to be impressed by your partner, and be looking out for them too. I think a lot of people probably stop looking or stop wanting to be impressed by them. But I think it's a difference between when you start dating someone, right? You're essentially it's like going for a job interview. At the start, you're just trying to here's my resume. I'm pretty impressive, right? And they will tell you if they think you are or not. That's just the way it goes.
The Fiji pics on Instagram.
Well, yeah. It worked.
How did I put together?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a look back at some of those pics, Collie's liked every one of them, so obviously worked. But yeah, at the start of the relationship, you're both trying so hard to impress. And then as time goes on, I think you start getting used to what your partner does. I think if I said to someone fresh now, I do jiu-jitsu, they'd probably be like, oh, that's pretty cool. What's that like? Whereas Collie, I've been doing jiu-jitsu for a while now, and I come home from jits and she's like, how was it, Ad? I'm like, yeah, it was good. I'd hugged Shane on the floor and Johnny and I had some cuddles and it was great. And she's just used to it, right? But then, I don't know.
Lorna's like, did you get ringworm again? I'm like, no, I didn't get it. I put the alcohol wipe straight away.
Yeah.
But you know what's cool about what you're saying as well is that I find when you start dating, to your point, you're doing things to impress them. But I feel like while your relationship blossoms and grows and sprouts, is that you are impressed by them, but without them trying to impress you.
Yeah, big difference.
It just naturally happens, and that's that whole being in love with them. You fall in love with them more and more and more because they do things that just impress you, not because they try to impress you, they just naturally do.
Totally. I also think then to the point before about treating, was it Mark who was talking about it? Treating yourself like any other relationship. It's the same thing though, right? Try and impress yourself.
Yeah, man.
Do things out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Impress yourself by pushing. You don't have to push hard, you don't have to be that person who's like, oh, I've got to hustle and get it. But just do things that, scare you a little bit. Impress yourself. And be kind to someone and be impressed by the fact of I always thought it was a bit weird to just go up and say hi to a stranger. But I impressed myself that I just went up and spoke to that person.
Man, I feel like I speak to people, especially now. I used to be a fuckwit. Sorry. But I feel like I speak to people really nicely, and I'm really kind. But man, I don't speak to myself ever nicely. But I mean, I don't feel like I speak badly to myself. But something that I used to do this, but I haven't done it in a long time. I used to be like, hey man, well done with that. That was fucking awesome. That was really good. And not in a reassurance kind of way, but just well fucking done. That was awesome. And that's something that Rose has been telling me for the longest time now. She's like, you should wake up in the morning and say some nice words to yourself in the mirror. And I've just been scared to do it. And so tonight, after I have a shower, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be really nice to myself and kind to myself, because I know I definitely can be nicer to myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man.
Man, I reckon that was a really good cover on the self and in relationships.
Yeah. And we even linked it to that relationship with God too, which is
beautiful,
what
right?
we wanted to do. So that was beautiful, man. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Man, look, as always, I feel so blessed to be able to have this podcast with you. Thank you so much for having us at Soulflex HQ.
That's it, man.
I love this place. I think it's phenomenal.
We were talking, if you're watching this on YouTube, I know that the background changes every week. We're not homeless, we swear. But we just thought we started doing this at Seb, who's Johnny's brother, another guy from Jiu-Jitsu, one of the Soulflex PT members here as well. It was really cool. We were doing it at his warehouse where he works with German and David as well. And then episode 1 and 2 were there. Then episode 3, we went to Wolf Life Academy, which is Johnny and Tim's Jiu-Jitsu Academy. And then we just thought let's just keep going to different places in our community, especially we've got so many really beautiful people in our Jiu-Jitsu community. Let's just carry this table and move it to different places and have a different setting all the time as well, maybe. But yeah, we just kind of keep rolling with it. It's we're saying it's like the sisterhood of the traveling pants for this table. We just take it around everywhere. But I was thinking, we talked about when we have therapy and stuff as well, or coaching, and giving people tools to take with them. I thought a really cool exercise that people could do at home throughout the week is write yourself a letter. You don't realize how daunting that is, writing yourself a letter. Did we talk about this the other week?
I messaged because I was saying about like Collie and I, and how like, to practice compassion, you even write a list of like positive things about yourself and read it to your partner.
You don't realize how hard it is to write a list about positive things about yourself. If I could write a list of positive things about you, easy. Write like 10 pages, 10 pages. Writing for yourself, it's really hard, right? But if you want to try this exercise, just write yourself a letter and don't overthink it, right? The moment you start thinking it, the ego comes into play, stored trauma comes into play. Just let the pen flow and let your intuition guide you. And just start with, so if it was me writing, I'd write, Dear Shane, and just write. And the first thought that pops into your mind, that's your intuition. The moment you sit with it and hesitate and think, that's when the ego mind starts to come in, right? The first thought that pops in, write it. It doesn't even matter if the sentence doesn't make sense, just write, right? I did one the other day and I wrote, Dear Shane, and then it was like, I'm really proud of you. And I haven't said that to myself in like a long time.
Yeah, man.
Right? When I was young, I used to always like, if I had an assignment or something in school or a project or a big exam, I'd always tell my mum, like, Mum, I'm gonna make you proud of me. And then I'd bust my ass and make sure I do it just to impress my mum, right? But I was always doing it for other people.
Yeah.
And then I kept writing. I'm like, why am I proud of myself? And I just kept writing. And then it just really opened up new insight into my mind. But that's a really cool practice that you can do to develop that relationship with yourself and have that conversation with yourself. But yeah.
That's beautiful, my man. Well, look, like always, man, it's an absolute pleasure. I look forward to recording the next episode. And yeah, man, thank you so much for having such an amazing conversation with me, and you too, Ads.
Yeah, it was fun. It was good.
Man. Thank you, bro.
My man. All right.
Done.
It's cool.